Allegra, I have a question for you that has no moral judgments attached to it whatsoever.
Okay.
Do you use any kind of delivery app? Uber Eats, Deliveroo, Grubhub, whatever, any of it?
Yeah, on occasion I do.
If you were to sort of ballpark it, like how many times a month we're talking?
2 to 3 to 4. I would say never more than once per week.
Do you feel like you are an enemy of the working class every time you use one?
Yes, I absolutely have a sense of crushing guilt, but not, I would say, a class-based one. This is a very personal guilt that I am not as good or effortless as a home cook as my mother.
Interesting. Okay. So you don't feel like a class traitor?
No, I feel like a domestic traitor.
I see. Okay.
Or
actually,
a traitor to my gender even.
That is very complex to unpack, but
yeah, I won't make you do that.
You know, it's funny. No, I actually feel the same way in a lot of ways. And in fact, about 4 or 5 months ago, I was like, I'm going to not order any delivery food during the week anymore and slowly learn how to cook the things that I would order.
And how's that going for you?
A lot of the food I eat is ugly and misshapen, but it's getting tastier the more I do it. So
are you just adding more butter?
I use a lot of olive oil and a lot of spices. The reason I asked that question is because we are looking at a very hot, controversial part of internet discourse this week. The two areas of the internet that one would think would be allies, time and time again, end up at war with each other when someone posts about their delivery orders getting messed up, or if someone wants to pop off about them being too expensive. And so today we want to look at the recurring event that seems to send online communities and news media into a panic and try to see if there's anything we can do to stop this vicious cycle. My name is Ryan Broderick. Joining me today is writer, researcher, Garbage Day contributor, Allegra Rosenberg. Allegra, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan.
Are you familiar with the term Treatlerite?
I absolutely am, as of a couple months ago.
Okay, can you define the term for us?
It's a combination of the words treat and Hitler. And I think it is someone who is selfishly dictatorial about their delivery app food. Like they are mad when it goes wrong. And they make a fool of themselves online by opening themselves up to criticism for being so, I guess, needy about the way that food is delivered to their door.
Okay, so as I understand it, and I want you to tell me if I'm wrong here, it seems like the discourse around sort of the Treatlerite phenomenon is some people say that gig worker apps, delivery apps are exploitative and that they should be outlawed or heavily regulated, and that it's okay that they're expensive because delivery food and delivery services shouldn't be inexpensive. And the other side of the argument are people who say that these services are extremely important for the disabled community, for people who have like limited mobility or access, or, you know, might live in a food desert or something, and that they need these services to be cheap and easy to use. Is that sort of the breakdown here?
I think that there's a third level to it, which is the old style American puritanical sort of Protestant attitude towards treats, and then the contemporary 21st century techno easy everything convenient attitude that has sort of been forcibly inculcated in this country's youth by business, and those, you know, that sort of inherent morality is at war with what we've sort of been taught or been offered to us on a plate in the last 10 to 15 years.
On a plate. Very good. Very good. Can you tell me a little bit about your memories of the pre-delivery app world?
Well, when it was pizza night, it was so exciting because my mom would call up the pizza place and we'd say what we wanted. And then she'd hand us the $20 bill so that when the doorbell rang, we'd have to go and give the money to the pizza guy. Right. And this taught us something about commerce, I think, and also made me not be scared of answering the door, which was a problem at the time. So there was a function a social function to delivery. It gave my mom a night off, and it also gave the kids the opportunity to feel like they were making dinner happen in the household.
Yes, it felt much more participatory. I was using delivery apps in the early 2010s. I remember like I had moved to New York and I had finally gotten enough money to like actually afford delivery. And I downloaded, I think it was Seamless. And I was using it like fairly regularly because I wasn't able to cook because I was living with like 4 roommates or whatever, and it was a mess and whatever. And then I was using them a lot when I was living in London in my late 20s, and I feel like my relationship with them changed drastically during COVID. Does that sort of gel with you as well?
Yeah, I mean, I would have begun using them when I was in college in LA, and LA was a very Postmates heavy town. And that was when Uber was cheap. That was when Postmates was cheap, when it was all
the
subsidized.
millennial subsidy life. So
that I got the millennial subsidy in college, and it was a really good time to have it because it meant that I could afford to go from USC to a club on Hollywood Boulevard for $5 in an Uber pool, or I could afford to get delivery food to my dirty college house and not have to worry about cleaning up the dishes. So I definitely wasn't thinking. I was like, wow, this is great. No other thoughts beside that at the time.
You know why Gen Z is radicalizing? Because they can't go to a $5 wings and $1 beer happy hour, get so intoxicated they throw up in their Uber, and end the night still spending under $50. That's why they're all little Hitler youth right now, is because they don't have cheap access to these services anymore. That's my hot take.
They don't have cheap access to anything. And even when the stuff that is financially cheap is incredibly emotionally or psychologically costly.
Yes, that is true. The way I sort of see it is like, if you were living in major cities around the world pre-COVID, you knew about these services, you were using them. I think the most like ethically grotesque of all of them is TaskRabbit, which is literally just like an app slave. That one I have never used, and I like will not use it. I think Post Malone was like using them all the time at one point. He was saying he was spending like tens of thousands of dollars a month on TaskRabbits. Anyways, I don't use that one.
TaskRabbit is good if you were a short girl with not a lot of upper body strength and you need help with home decoration tasks. I will say that.
Okay. All right. I'll give you that one. Yeah, I'm tall. I'm a long man.
You have never felt the way that I have felt about trying to hang something up or mount something on a tall piece of hair.
I've never needed a tall man to come to my house to do things for me. Yeah.
How about I'll call you next time instead of the TaskRabbit.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. I don't do a lot these days. My life's pretty boring. So I feel like if you were like in college, or if you're living in a city, you're around young people in the 2010s, you knew about these services, you were using them. And I remember the kind of an inverse of the thing you talked about with like your family and pizza night. I was staying with my parents during COVID for a couple months and like sort of like hiding out in the suburbs. And I remember ordering delivery food in the suburbs. And like my dad like came to the door to like see how it would work. And it was like a very kind of, I think, mind-bending moment. And I remember like talking to my mom the next day being like, yeah, like I ordered food. And she's like, how did you do it? And I was like, with the app on my phone. She's like, what do you mean? They just like came to the door? Like, how do they know where, it was like ordering an Uber in the suburbs. It was like kind of a weird thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like this discourse about sort of the morality of it and the ethics of it, at least according to the timeline that we're about to go through here, seems to start like right around that moment where the whole country is now using these services, even if they're not in major cities.
Yeah.
And I actually think to a certain degree, in major cities, these services make more sense.
Absolutely. I imagine working as a food delivery driver for an app in a suburb or rural area must be one of the worst jobs you could possibly have.
Yes. My parents live north of Boston. I take an Uber usually from like the train station to go see them. And like whenever I can, I talk to the Uber driver the whole time because it just seems like that's really boring and it's a long drive to nowhere. So according to our timeline, we sent our researcher Adam down the rabbit hole to figure out when this discourse started. And as best as we can tell, it all began with a disability activist named Amani Barbarin, who in January of 2020, weirdly enough, January 6th, 2020, started posting about, quote, ableist bullshit that you have to put up with when you use DoorDash. And the screenshot, do you want to sort of, I'll drop it in the chat here. It's on the right-hand side. Click on that and just sort of describe the screenshot in the tweet for the audience.
Okay, so this is a screenshot of a conversation, an SMS conversation between OP and a DoorDash driver. And the DoorDash driver says, can you meet me in the lobby? And OP says, I'm disabled and I need you to come up to my apartment. And the driver says, I cannot leave my car in a fire lane. And OP says, well, okay, drop it off at the front desk. And the guy says, okay. And then the OP sort of piles on and says, maybe if you were unable to accommodate disabled people, you should get another gig. I will be reporting this interaction to DoorDash. And then the last thing you see in the screenshot is the guy saying, I can't park illegally. I just had a $300 ticket, which, extrapolating narratively, the guy might have gotten the ticket from the last time that he was asked to park illegally and bring something up.
I think that this is a really interesting example of this because, like, I actually think that, like, neither of these people are particularly wrong.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
they're just they're sort of encountering each other at, like, a very specific kind of breakdown in American society where, like, a person made vulnerable by lack of, like, healthcare accommodation and a person made vulnerable by lack of, like, a living wage working for, like, a fucking gotcha game that, like, connects them with clients are, like, having to navigate, like, this horrible gray area that I feel like most of these apps make money by primarily existing in.
Yeah, I mean, this is, not to bring out the bugbear, but this is a prime example of intersectionality and the difficulties that it presents in American discourse, because you immediately feel the need, without even really being cued by the OP. You're like, oh, I think I have to take a side here, because you've been conditioned in these kinds of, presented with these kinds of, like, am I the asshole situations? Okay, you're like, okay, who's the asshole in this situation? Right. Whereas that isn't, nuance does exist. Maybe. I've heard that it does. Like, who can be sure?
Well, it doesn't exist in this instance very long because DoorDash's help account jumps in the replies and says, we can help with that. Send us a direct message with your email address and phone number associated with your DoorDash account, and we'll see what we can do. Mm-hmm. So, like, they've immediately been like, yeah, we're going to help you, like, punish this guy, which then I think escalates this into proper Twitter discourse. This was still the age of Twitter.
So territory.
Yeah. So you get one user named ClipArtBear writing, if I was in this situation having to choose between risking a $300 ticket to appease someone for my $3 delivery fee and no tip, I would bash my head into the concrete outside or drive my car into a creek. And then another user named Transgender writes, there were free parking spots. He just didn't want to bring her the food, part of his job. Barbara later posted that there was free parking available, but that's almost besides the point, once hundreds of people are screaming at you online. And the whole unfortunate situation becomes so heated because we've created this world where every step of doing this is now so depressingly common.
It's like the mustard tweet.
What's the mustard tweet?
Do you know the mustard? These are my dipping mustards.
No, I don't. Wait, I don't.
Wait,
I don't
know the mustard. Wait,
yeah, wait. Dipping mustards?
This is like one. I feel like this is one of the best tweets of the last 10 years.
Hey, this is Grant, the producer. I need to jump in.
Yeah.
Congratulations. You are the second guest to stump Ryan.
It's true.
So now I need to cue the Price is Right music.
Yep.
Well done.
I got stumped. Okay, read me the mustard tweet.
This is from July 15th, 2020, so deep in psychosis territory. @Anime Serbia tweeted, how couples argue today. Wife, cool how there's 4 mustards in the fridge in 2018 and none go with my sandwich. Normal world. Husband, wow, it's almost like those are my dipping mustards and aren't meant to go on sandwiches? But okay, go off.
That is how couples
looks like this was a repost,
true.
So I don't know where the original one went. It might have been from before 2020. Sorry, that was on me.
Okay, but the point stands. That is how people talk. Yes, I agree. And congratulations. Back to our timeline here. This sort of example of basically a disabled person being like, here's my problem with these services, and then a bunch of people dogpiling them and calling them lazy. it becomes a massive sort of meme on Twitter. And I think what's really interesting is that this is all happening 2 months before the world really knows about COVID. Mm-hmm. And it's like interesting that we've already sort of reached that point. But obviously the user base for these delivery apps grows tremendously. So according to some numbers we had been able to pull, there was 123% increase in the US of people using these services. And that obviously leads directly to people getting mad about how they're using them. As you've sort of been tracking this stuff, do you think that there are bad actors involved in these fights, like making them worse? Or do you think it is literally just like a total breakdown in communication? Like, do you feel like there's like a culture war angle to this stuff?
I feel like insofar as COVID made everything worse, it obviously made this problem worse. But I think that there is something inherent in people's like wish to defend their own pleasure. And that is something that's visible across fandoms and across all sorts of online cultural spaces where they're like, well, this feels good to me. So and then it's like a retroactive justification for why, you know, they in particular should be allowed to do it even when there's some sort of socioeconomic harm in play. And I think the worst thing, I think for a lot of, you know, the sort of post-Tumblr, post-SJW people, like the worst thing that you can do is be accused of not understanding your own actions, right? The cultural element that I think that you're picking up on here is like the idea of a straw man, the idea that there is a group of militant disability activists who are like supporting the entire business model of these apps, when really I and this is completely unfounded, but I feel like most people probably fall somewhere more towards like my use of the apps, which is like, yes, sometimes. And then there's like the, you know, millionaire addicts who order delivery multiple times a day, every day, which I've also seen sort of proof of. But there has to be a sort of bell curve here, right? Of the people who are like, I wouldn't ever use an app, you know, for this reason. And then the people who are like psychologically and physiologically dependent on it. I feel like most people are fairly normal about these apps, the same way they're fairly normal about Uber. Yes, there are like downtown club kids who refuse to step foot on the subway because their rich parents think that they're going to get shanked. But most people take an Uber. Like I take an Uber if I have to go to Astoria because I'm not going to sit on the train for an hour and a half.
I did it the other day. It took me 2 hours to get up there. It was brutal. Yeah. And I did Uber back because it was late. And I was like, I can't do this. I did the train and it took way too long. Anyways, different podcast topic.
But this is, you know, this is a podcast about, you know, people being not normal online. And I think delivery
New
apps,
tagline.
Delivery apps and ride sharing apps at this point are, you know, as close to a utility as a privately provided service can get. And most people use them normally.
I think that's right. I think it's very silly to assume that huge swaths of the country are spending $40 plus every meal to be delivered to their door. I don't really believe that. I also think that COVID, I mean, we've attacked this in a couple of different ways in different episodes now, but like internet discourse became more aggressive during and after COVID. Like there was just a million ways to prove that is true. And it is still more aggressive than it used to be. One user in 2021 kind of summed up actually a point that you just made, named Eper Marine, who wrote, "Hi, disabled people exist and many services that abled see as lazy or a luxury are necessary for us to live. Think before you shame people for using food delivery or online shopping, Uber or pre-prepared food, for fuck's sake." And then they wrote again, "Also consider that all these things cost extra and most disabled people barely make any money, but our disabilities cost us tons." And I think that is like a very important piece of this, which is that like there was this post sort of 2018 Bernie bro online leftist movement, dirtbag left, whatever you want to call it, that was like trying to find easy wins, you know, and it was like very Luddite. And they're like, oh, let's attack stuff that we think is popular. So they're like, okay, delivery apps are going to be like the next big late stage capitalist thing that we go after. And they don't really like nuance. And then this is another community being like, yeah, we know they're bad, they're expensive, but we don't have any other option in America.
Something I'm interested in, maybe don't know enough about to, you know, speak on in any detail. We might think that food delivery apps are like huge here and people are super dependent on it, but we've got nothing on China and the food delivery situation there. I mean, you've spent time there, right? Like, or more about that. I imagine that there's also because it's a more urbanized, or the cities are bigger and there's more of them, but I would imagine that there's such a delivery culture there that surpasses sort of anything that we have going on here.
Yeah, I heard a crazy thing when I was there that this was before COVID because I was there in 2019. Mm-hmm. A big thing in the winter was hot pot delivery. So like if people listening don't know what Chinese hot pot is, it's a big pot full of boiling water and you put stuff in it and you eat it. Mm-hmm. And I was like hearing about this and I was like, so like, do you like return the hot pot? And they're like, no, like they send you an electric stove and a pot all in a kit to like make hot pot at home, and like a delivery guy pulls up with that and you can just throw it away when you're done.
See, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I went to a Chinese mall where I think in about 90% of the stores you couldn't buy anything physically. You could look at it and then order it on an app to be delivered to your house by the time you get home. It is a totally different, it's a totally different environment.
This goes back to what I was saying about like the American Puritanism. I think that we would never let it get to that stage. I think that the criticism that your mildest sort of bell curve uses of delivery apps face on social media is a sign that, I mean, people like to go to the grocery store in America. People really like to go to the grocery store. People were so excited when the Wegmans opened in New York.
I love the grocery store.
Yeah,
I love going to grocery stores in new places.
Yes.
I love grocery stores. Yes.
So
I wish I could buy eggs there. Maybe one day I'll be able to buy eggs again.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, but that's what I mean. I think that there is the sort of weight of our collective grocery going culture and also our collective dining out culture, which weathered the storms of COVID, I think, fairly well. Why did New York take away the dining sheds? Let the rats share them. It's fine.
I know. I had a birthday in a dining shed a couple years ago, and then 2 homeless people went viral for having sex in it like a couple hours after, and you can still see pieces of my cake there. I'm not even kidding.
No, but that is just something something that would happen to you, Ryan, specifically.
Yeah. My mom brought that cake. Like, she brought cake and we all went to a bar in the dining shed. It was like 2021 maybe.
Was that the one
and we
that
ate cake outside? Yeah, you were there. Yeah, so then
I remember that cake.
This explains why Ryan's always like, when I have a birthday party, it makes strangers very horny. And I was like, that's such a weird fucking thing to say, Ryan. But now I get it. Cool.
2 homeless people had sex on the bench that we all ate cake on.
I remember
earlier
that
night.
Funny.
Yeah, pretty cool. But I think, the point here is that like delivery apps, I think, have been very successful because they have found a business model that operates at this very unique intersection of a lot of the ways that American society breaks down. Mm-hmm. It is a country that is not easy to live in. It is very large. It is very dependent on like a culture. It's very defined by a culture of doing things yourself. Mm-hmm. And none of us want to live that way, but we all feel like we're forced to. And we also don't like to take care of our most vulnerable. And we also don't get along online anymore. So like all of this discourse has kind of led to this situation where it is most often, based on the research that we've seen, disabled people being like, I wish these apps were more accommodating for my needs. And then a bunch of angry leftists being like, you are lazy and a problem. And then just a total breakdown in communication from there.
The Treatlerite thing is very much, I don't think, aimed at disabled people. It's a pejorative for anybody who seems too dependent on these apps and too stringent about how well they are being served by these apps.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because we're going to talk about how this evolved into the Treatlerite phenomenon right after the break. Are you a fan of all things dark and strange? Well, Heart Starts Pounding is a weekly podcast hosted by Kaylin Moore. Each week, Kaylin takes you on a dark journey into a new place, a new time, or a new crime. From terrifying true urban legends to Nazi cults to cold case murder mysteries, these are stories that will satisfy your dark curiosity and make you ask yourself how well we really know ourselves, our neighbors, and our world. And how well we really want to. If you're looking to join a passionate community of the darkly curious, check out Heart Starts Pounding at heartstartspounding.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, Panic World listeners, this is Ryan Broderick. I know you love stories that can be gross and unhinged, and I know a perfect place to do that. Risk. It's the show where people tell true stories they've never thought they'd dare to share. Listeners say the show makes them burst out laughing and crying. Good crying. Surprising honesty and the most jaw-dropping moments that are stranger than fiction. Like the one about the guy who cooked and served his own leg to his friends as tacos. I saw those photos once, and they have never left my mind ever since, because it looked kind of good. Or the woman who found out that the person she was sharing erotic fantasies with online was her dad. Uh-oh. I wish I had that kind of relationship with my dad. Or the couple who discovered the best way they could show their love for each other involved, activities we normally save for the toilet. Hey, whatever keeps the marriage alive. If you think you've heard it all, just wait till you hear Risk, available now on the Odyssey app or wherever you get your podcasts. Okay, our story in the evolution of this discourse comes back in around May 2022 when a Grubhub driver leaves an order in the driveway in retaliation for a too low tip. The customer is in a wheelchair, and she tells TikTok about it, and this is an excerpt from what she says. I'm in a wheelchair, so I couldn't go get my food in the middle of the driveway. I ended up having to wait an hour until my caregiver came home so I could eat. When I approached Grubhub about the issue, they decided it wasn't that big of a problem and didn't want to do a whole lot. So I'm hoping we can spread some awareness here as to how this discriminatory and hopefully things like this can never happen again. Grubhub ended up offering her, can you guess what Grubhub offered her in the end after all this TikTok controversy?
$20 or something.
15% off, which I don't think would even be $20 based on Grubhub prices.
Oh, God.
Wait, no, she told BuzzFeed News, RIP, I know that the vast majority of drivers for these companies are really decent people. The comments on my video show that, but it's important for drivers to understand that their services impact people in ways they probably aren't even aware, which I sympathize with. But also, like, I come back to this idea that, like, this person making, like, essentially $2 on an order has suddenly become, like, a frontline worker for, like, disability care because, like, America is a nightmare. like that in my opinion, like, just shouldn't be how this all plays out. And obviously Grubhub is like, have a coupon, sorry for the trouble.
Right. And something about her call to action rings true. It's like, well, it's not the driver's fault. Let's talk to the company about this because they're essentially the one causing everything in this situation.
Right. And this TikTok, the user's name is It's Jamila. She inspires a whole trend where people start, like, going through old tweets on TikTok. There's a whole trend where they're talking about kind of like bad deliveries from things like Instacart or whatever, or like poorly packed groceries. And it kicks off again on X, which I think is still Twitter at this point, 2022. So the site's transitioning into Musk ownership at this time, and that's when someone screenshots one of these TikToks and goes viral for writing, "I hate when my underpaid gig slave is a man." And that's because they're making fun of the latest evolution of this, where people complain that men are getting groceries on these apps and they don't know how to shop for you. Mm-hmm. Now we're getting into, like, proper Treatlerite territory. So can you for the listeners describe a bit of how how gender fits into this discourse? Because it's almost like a snowball that's, like, becoming like a giant avalanche of just like various discourses. There's
two ways that gender plays into this, and one is specifically with, like, any delivery driver. So whether that's of groceries or of, like, prepared food, it's like, my app showed a picture of a woman, but then a man came up the stairs, and this was like a massive discourse explosion, I think only a couple of months ago, where people were like, but this man is probably an illegal immigrant, so, like, how dare you not support his right to try and earn a living? And someone's like, but I should know who's coming up my stairs. Like, I'm traumatized. I don't feel safe when there's, like, a man I don't know near my door that I have to, it just went on and on and on. And then the second half of this is slightly less sinister, and it's mainly about a man's ability to grocery shop, which is under fire in terms of the fact that if you have like an Instacart shop or someone who's picking out groceries from the shelves for you, and the stereotype would be a guy isn't going to know the difference between like parsley and Italian parsley, or like, you know, all these like very, very specific and quite important cooking things. Or one of the ones I saw had to do with ice cream, so then that raised criticism because it's like, just eat the fucking ice cream or whatever.
Right. I saw that one too.
Yeah, you know the one I'm talking about. That is, I think, less of a specific gig worker thing and more of like a gender politics, gender essentialism thing, where it's like a man in a grocery store with a literal list of the things he has to get in front of him doesn't understand how to find those things or how to substitute appropriately.
We're going to get to like how this becomes more politically weaponized in a second. But the reason why I think this sort of next step here is important is because this is the moment, and I think this happens in a lot of sort of viral trends, viral conversations, is that the core groups at the center of it start to lose control of the narrative. I mean, this happened a lot with like, when we were doing research about like how the bin Laden stuff started to spread on TikTok, this is exactly the same thing, which was like, effectively it was like people of color and smaller communities sharing this thing internally. People start to like jump onto the trend because TikTok obviously likes promotes things as trends. It spins out of control, and then like weird freaks on Twitter screenshot it and like turn it into a culture war thing, which is exactly what's happening here with the Treatlerites thing, where once again, we started with two groups, essentially like, let's call them like disability advocates on one side and like workers' rights advocates on the other, kind of arguing about like this weird pressure point. And they're getting more aggressive with each other as this thing becomes more popular to talk about. And as it becomes more popular to talk about, really dumb people engage with it and start being like, I don't think my DoorDash person should be a man because like they're going to kill me. Or someone being like, you're engaging in slavery. It's like bad faith on both sides. Yeah.
I mean, this is also sort of the normalization of kvetch culture when it comes to convenience. What are we allowed to complain publicly about? I mean, my mom would always say that things were déclassé. You know, you shouldn't do that. Why? Well, not because it's wrong or because it's bad. It's not classy. And
I use gauche. I love the word gauche. I'm like, that's extremely
same
gauche.
Thing. And so to me, complaining about anything related to a service that you voluntarily signed up for and isn't like, something serious. Like there's a difference between like, okay, tweeting at the airline is the only way I'm going to get my problem fixed, and tweeting about my DoorDash order being like, and that's a thing you got to figure out with yourself and text in the group chat about. I think that there is a spectrum of acceptable to déclassé as far as kvetching online about something that's going on in your life goes, you know, like, and this stuff, well, I wouldn't say it's wrong of someone to say, you know, this person picked the wrong thing and maybe like try and at DoorDash about it. It's like, really, man, a little déclassé. Right.
That said, I would yell at an airline, the company on the internet, and I will go scorched earth on a rental car company.
I was going to say that's the other one.
I could spend the next couple hours talking about how like technology has not caught up with renting a car, and there's no reason in 2025 that it should take an hour to rent a car. Anyway, okay. The reason why it's important to kind of track these discourses as they become sillier is because as they become sillier and as they become larger, bad actors start to notice and they start to figure out ways to weaponize them. And this has been particularly successful for the right wing after COVID, as they sort of all came online and got smarter about it. So can you guess what direction this story goes in next in terms of politics?
Something to do with delivery apps and wokeism?
You're not wrong. Yeah. So in October of 2022, a Fox News contributor named Scott Martin ordered Taco Bell, and it cost $28. And he posts about the order the next day. He reveals inadvertently that like he didn't use any of the combo meals. So he's just like ordering individual Taco Bell items without saving any money, which would be like one problem why that's not working. He then blames Bidenflation for the reason his Taco Bell delivery order was so expensive. And there's a Fox News sort of clip about this. Let's listen.
You want to know how bad inflation is? Yesterday, yes, I had a nice lunch at Taco Bell. Cost me about $28 at Taco Bell for lunch. People need to pay for those things, and they do that by getting jobs and getting in the economy and getting active and getting involved.
Wait a minute. You spent $28 at Taco Bell for just yourself?
For lunch, yeah. It's true.
Okay.
That's a lot of chalupa.
Then Taco Bell gets involved, and they're like, 14 times $2 burritos equals $28. What's your $28 order? Then AOC gets involved, and she's like, if someone is talking politics and eating $28 of Taco Bell in one sitting, then my immediate follow-up question is, what are their thoughts on Biden's executive order on cannabis rescheduling? That's pretty funny. And then the New York Times gets involved, and they write, you could order $28 of Taco Bell, or you could do the right thing and make this yourself in 30 minutes, your choice. And then right as it's sort of like cresting about, this went on for 5 days. God damn. Just as that was sort of dying down, this is when it kicks back up again, because a user named Nhood Publicist, or the Neighborhood Publicist, writes a big long thread about using a grocery delivery app and getting a man who can't order things for her. And then we start all over again. Yes.
But it's like, first of all, this is a question I have for you. I don't know if this is made clear, but how was it figured out that the $28 was spent in an app versus he seems to be fronting like he spent $28 in person at a Taco Bell, but was it determined that he had done it through a delivery app?
Okay, it's a screenshot of a digital order system. Oh my God, this is so fucking stupid. He's in a fight with the Taco Bell Twitter account.
Jesus.
Posting his receipt. Okay, I will read his receipt for you. So his receipt was one burrito supreme for $6, $6.09, I should say. One nachos Bel Grande for $7.14. One large Baja Blast Freeze for $3.79. Nice. A nacho cheese Doritos Locos Taco Supreme for $3.19, and a Doritos Cheesy Gordita Crunch for $5.19. I should say that's pretty close to my regular Taco Bell order, actually, and it comes out to $28. Wait, I got the smoking gun. In the screenshot, it says $25.40. He claims that he spent $28. I'm guessing it was $28 plus a delivery fee, and he didn't tip.
I see.
There you go.
I see.
Yeah.
I have eaten Taco Bell like 3 times in my life. That just seems like so much food. Ugh.
I didn't want to admit this in the opening, but that is pretty much the only thing that I'm ordering delivered anymore, and it's usually after 1 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
I'm down to once a month.
Yeah, I'll order delivery when I'm sick, which, because I have the immune system of a flea, is about once a month. Yeah.
Okay, I think that's fair too. Going back to sort of like accessibility conversation,
right.
I think that's totally fine. What I think is like very important here to sort of like point out is that by 2022, post-COVID, the sort of dumb internet discourse that isn't culture war related or is like vaguely culture war related will eventually become culture war related, because the people that work for Fox News now are all on the same platforms. We are looking at what we're fighting about. So they're very, very quick to sort of jump into an argument between, you know, disabled activists and leftists and be like, we're going to get into this too. And there's like no off switch. And a lot of larger accounts sort of see that culture war thing and think it started there. And they don't really do like what we've been doing is like dig to the very beginning, which is why on October 18th, after the sort of Instacart mail shopper thing kicks back up again, Jorts the cat gets involved. Are you familiar with Jorts the cat?
Of course I'm familiar with Jorts the cat.
Yeah, so Jorts the cat, I guess you could say like what? He's like a
union guy.
Yeah, like a pro-labor cat novelty account, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jorts writes, all the love for Jorts, but this is why labor-based analyses by themselves can't get us to disability justice. The left has to do better. Thank you, Jorts the cat.
Thanks.
And then, of course, there's a million people in the replies fighting about this. One user writes, under capitalism, disabled people are often forced to be complicit in harmful labor practices, whereas the left has a choice about being complicit in ableism.
Ostensibly, it's the sort of pro-labor position, right? But it really is more or less like a sort of pleasure, anti-convenience position, where it's like, if you display a if you display a use of these services that is over what this sort of general public has deemed to be too much, we'll jump you for it. And it's like, well, like where does the line? Where is the line?
And it actually seems like your mom kind of defined this pretty well, which is like you probably shouldn't complain about most of this stuff because, you know, the next stage will just be another kind of leftist on leftist war, and it'll just get dumber and more absurd. And we're going to talk about all of that after the break. In July 2024, this kind of like weird leftist Twitter adjacent account written by this guy, Jules Sudolcev, based on the research we've seen, this is the moment, you know, when he enters that the policing of other people's pleasure, as you've described it, becomes the defining narrative of this discourse cycle. Mm-hmm. It has sort of left the realm of like internecine political fights. Mm-hmm. So he goes on a tear, and he has like multiple tweets about this. So one is, I'm so genuinely confused by whatever the opposite of woke mind virus has a bunch of leftists defending Chipotle because I think it's unconscionable to charge $25 for a small lunch, which goes up to $40 if you want it delivered, while the CEOs of both Chipotle and DoorDash are billionaires and they both dramatically underpay their workers. Another one, fuck, I didn't realize you guys were so inflation pilled. How did you find a way to blame yourself for corporate price gouging? I'm sorry, you are all sick. And then another one, when did Chipotle start charging $15 pre-tax for burrito? It's been there's a lot of these.
Wait, so I'm not even understanding. Is he pro-Treatler or anti-Treatlerite?
Okay, I can do this. I swear I can do this. He's arguing that the delivery apps are price gouging, and he wants other leftists to be mad about how much restaurant food costs when you use the app. Once again, this is all like very serious emotions based on the price of a Chipotle burrito, which I think is like really important to hold on in the depths of your heart as we talk about this.
Here's the thing. It's like, at the end of the day, food prices caused the French Revolution. Food prices, as we are seeing right now, is kind of what it's all about. This is just sort of this internet-y microcosm of the larger human conversation about food prices that has been going on since the days of Ian Nasser in frickin' Sumeria.
Yes, underneath this whole thing is something very valid. Food does cost too much, and we have zero safety net, and we spend our time arguing, amongst each other because there's no real good way to impact change. And I think, Jules would probably agree with that. And we need to now change entirely how we are thinking about this stuff, because there is another layer to this that we haven't discussed yet, which is that amid all of this, people online discover that Mr. Jules here has been ordering bottles of water.
Water? As in like distilled water? Bottled water?
Like a bottled water. Like he's ordering bottled water, which I think is genuinely, unless it's sparkling, I think it is genuinely insane to order bottles of water if you live in like a city where if you live in New York City or something, like
it's insane to drink bottled water.
I would agree, but like I don't want to get yelled at by people who are like, I've also lived in places without potable tap water. I am aware of how this works, but another user stepped in during this whole episode and was like, today I learned people order water for delivery. I am not poor. I am not working class. I am not lower middle class. At worst, I am middle class and probably upper middle class. I can't imagine ordering water, in part because my dad would climb out of his casket to beat me up. And then somebody else shared a DoorDash receipt that showed them spending $154 to order 12 packs of Skittles Little Bites and 39 cans of Steel Reserve. Which I think is a joke.
Did you read the Katie Weaver piece about sugar?
Yes, but could you summarize it for our listeners?
So, I mean, this is a piece that came out in the New York Times a week or two ago, and it's a funny essay about her addiction to sugar. And she goes to the spa, and she tries to rid herself of her addiction, and then at the, no spoilers, but at the end she decides that she won't bother ridding herself of her addiction. And the comments were, some of them were like, this is great personal writing, she's such a funny writer, love Katie Weaver. And other comments were like, how dare this skinny white woman write this article about how she can eat all the sugar she wants and not get fat. She's evil. And I'm like, it's so morally fraught. Our relationship with food, with treats, with pleasure through eating. And I think that the reaction to that piece is very much a sort of reflected facet that illuminates this conversation that we're having right now, which is like, what food should the average American be allowed to enjoy, and how, and at what cost, and in what order of convenience?
It is so great you brought that up, actually, because God, these flame wars go on for so long. So
I love that you said flame wars. Let's start calling them flame wars again instead of discourse.
Yeah, I'm tired of saying the word discourse in this episode. So like this flame war against this Jules account goes on for like 3 days, finally culminating in a post where he writes, "The only reason food delivery is a luxury is because corporate greed folks raise the price to make them unaffordable to the average person. We've been doing cheap food delivery at reasonable prices and decent wages for decades, but all of a sudden, y'all," very important when they drop the y'all online. That means that they're really crashing out. "Y'all pretend ordering pizza or Chinese our entire lives is somehow different." Refusing to give up this argument, though, led to an incredible bunch of replies here. So let me read a few. "My politics are whatever this isn't. This has gotten really embarrassing, man. Just take a break for a day or two." To which Jules replied, "I will never log off. That's how you'll know I'm dead." This is the exact moment this summer when we get the term burrito taxi. Are you familiar with burrito taxi?
It's just like you're ordering a taxi just to bring a burrito to you.
Yes, that is what it is. I would say this is the moment that like this conversation online about delivery apps, about accessibility, about the politics of them and the ethics of them completely collapses. And now everyone's just screaming at each other. And I think you're totally right, which is that they're now completely focused on, do we deserve them? Should we have them? Are they a luxury? It is like, it's impossible to make sense of what anyone's saying at this point. Like there's certain users that are tying this into like illegal immigration stuff and like wanting to like call ICE on these people. There's another person who writes, "Don't order a burrito taxi if the fact your servant can't speak perfect English bothers you and you want him deported." Like it's become I think I've used this term in an episode before, like a wicker man.
Yeah.
This nexus point of all of this bullshit, and now we've just dumped everything onto it.
I think the term servant, as used in this discourse, is particularly telling because that ties it into so many other discourses about domestic labor globally and in America that we don't have time to go into here. But when they erupt...
Well, we got time. Let's do it.
Well, I mean, when there is something that is incredibly explosive about anybody revealing their own personal relationship to domestic labor in their childhood or in their present day, that can then be weaponized in any discussion that they're currently having or that they will ever have. I think the classic example of this is a Tumblr drama from 10 years ago about this Tumblr famous blogger named Sixpence, who revealed that she had essentially a child slave.
The Sixpence child slave Tumblr drama. Right. I remember this. Yeah.
Okay,
explain it. Explain this to the audience.
I don't know if I can remember this perfectly, but there was a popular blogger, who was popular for Tumblr reasons. Like, they were funny, they posted a lot, whatever.
A lot of creepypasta. It was like a creepypasta blogger.
Yeah, they were from the global south, I believe.
Southeast Asia, I believe.
And they revealed something, and I don't know if you remember that article from ages ago, like "My Family's Slave," like that.
Oh, it's what's her face? It's Gia Tolentino,
right? So it's that,
and everyone was like, "Oh, Gia Tolentino is having a Sixpence slave drama thing."
Exactly. Yeah. So it's that kind of this person was essentially an indentured servant in their family, which was probably common in the class that they are in the place where they come from, but to a global audience, especially this must have been 2016, like peak Tumblr SJW, was hugely explosive and caused an immense amounts of catastrophic discourse, and whether it's okay for anybody in the entire world anywhere to have a servant, and whether Sixpence should be canceled. I think the problem with Sixpence is that they were just completely unapologetic.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're also talking about like children fighting with each other to some degree, but I agree. Like, yeah, there was a real breakdown in communication there, and I think you touched on something really important that I want to hit one last time before we get to the end of our story so far, which is that these are just not the arenas for serious political conversation. Like, fighting about the cost of a Chipotle burrito on the internet is an insane way to spend your time, no matter what you're trying to do. I would also argue that at this point, a viral campaign to like get better wages or to scare a corporation with like your social media activity, like probably isn't going to work. There was a brief moment, where it was possible back in like 2014, you could do like a flash mob to like scare Target into being woke or something.
Yeah.
But we don't live in that world anymore. Obviously there are all kinds of ways to be an activist online and to use the internet for activism. We're seeing this right now with the 5051 movement on Reddit. Like, the stuff is happening and the internet plays a part.
Right.
But the days of like scaring a corporation into doing rainbow capitalism because you got mad about it on Twitter are over. You're not doing activism by fighting with people about whether or not it's ethical to order bottled water, which is crazy and you shouldn't do it.
It's crazy. You can just say something is crazy and or déclassé rather than getting into the culture war about it. But I mean, that's inevitable. That's always going to happen. It's the default state at this point of the internet conversation between any groups that differ by opinion from each other even slightly will inevitably devolve.
So the reason we're talking about this is that exact devolution that you're talking about, and how it continues to sort of come back up and get worse somehow every time. So for instance, about 3 weeks before we recorded this, a Twitter user wrote, "A common boomer trope is that millennials are broke because we eat out all the time. The reality is that if you have a remote job or you're a freelancer, eating out is often more economical than cooking due to lost productivity." And then they write like an insane thread about how like they're ordering all their meals on DoorDash. It goes viral again. Someone writes, "I want 2025 to be the year that people admit to themselves that they actually just prefer to spend their money on burrito taxis and that this is an objectively luxury good. If you own a refrigerator and a stove, it is the first approximation, never more economical to order delivery." And they have a whole thread about how like you're a class traitor if you order food online. And then that spreads, of course, to our new little leftist honeypot, Blue Sky. It gets screenshot on Blue Sky, and someone writes, "As someone on the Zoomer millennial boundary, I feel there's a legit problem with people not knowing how to purchase groceries." Then there's a whole fight there about it. And then, of course, our man Jules, who's now on Blue Sky, gets involved one last time, writing, Sorry, not to restart the burrito taxi discourse, but it's genuinely funny that we're openly being fucked sideways by the worst price gouging and wealth inequality ever. And some of you are like, well, if you didn't want to get fucked sideways, why didn't you make a burrito at home and drink tap water? And then someone replied, "Motherfucker, you have a sink." There you go.
To historicize this discourse a little bit, it's important to remember that we live, despite everything, we live in a time where food is more abundant and available than anybody, our ancestors.
Except for eggs. Except for
eggs. That's a different problem.
No more eggs.
But we live in a time where food is the most abundant and affordable it's ever been. And now if we go back approximately 120, 150 years, the thing that's costing you the most is food and clothing. And rent is costing you the least. So we have entered the sort of reverse zone where now things like rent are sky high, but food and clothing are almost, unlimited compared to the resources that were available to people a century or more ago.
So you're saying that if you order Shein, you're a class traitor?
Yeah, exactly.
And you're ableist if you say it's bad to order Shein. Is that where you're headed with this?
It's just ugly. That's even worse.
It is ugly. It's really ugly garbage.
So bad.
Look, what you need to do is go on eBay, search for H&M clothing made before 2016. Buy as much of it as possible. That shit will never break, and it's pretty cheap. That's what you got to do. You got to get them. You got to get these brands before the forced obsolescence.
Yeah, Urban Outfitters pre-2015. I'm still wearing that stuff.
Yeah, it was right before they shifted into like doing their own thrifting. So you're buying like really upmarked thrifted clothes from whatever. Okay, to bring it all on home, do you think that there's an end in sight to this kind of debate online, or do you think it is just baked into the machinery of the platforms we use?
People are always going to argue about food and pleasure and money. And this is the sort of perfect nexus of all of those highly contentious topics, specifically in American society. And I feel like it's that one of these things that, once this discourse has sort of arrived and the grooves have been worn in, it's not something that people are likely to get away from. I can only hope that people learn from the prevalence of the discourse that complaining about your delivery order, unless there's something, egregiously wrong with it from the restaurant point of view or the driver point of view, but there's a déclassé sort of gradient there.
Yeah.
If you surpass it, you are likely to be set upon by the Treatlerite calling, wolves.
I ordered Taco Bell about a month ago, coming back from the bar, and I got the wrong order. And you know why I didn't go on Blue Sky or X and complain about it? Because it was way more food. Someone had ordered way more food than I did. And I ate that shit cold all weekend.
You were blessed by not having complained about your orders online
That's
before.
Right. It was karmic. Yeah. It was a karmic debt repaid.
Exactly.
If you keep that in your mind, it doesn't work for airlines or rental cars, as we discussed. You can yell at them all you want, but everything else, I would just say, "Oh, my meal came out wrong. Hey, universe, get me next time."
Practice resilience with your relationship with delivery and rideshare apps, and you will be karmically rewarded.
And I think in all seriousness, remember that the people that are delivering your food are just as screwed by this stuff as you are. In America, things are always getting slightly worse. So be kind to each other and don't order bottled water. I think we can all agree that one, you just don't need to do that.
I think the problem with this guy is that he's probably got microplastic in his brain from all the bottled water.
Look, when I lived in Sao Paulo, you cannot drink the tap water. You will get ill. And people have a filter or they order jugs of water. And in fact, I once ordered a bottle of water, a normal still bottle of water at a restaurant, and all the Brazilians were like, "That is insane. Why would you do that?" They're like, that is a ridiculous thing to do, to order a bottle of water. So you can't even make that argument. In countries where you can't drink the water, that is still crazy to order a bottle of water. Allegra, thank you for coming on so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Ryan. This was great.
If people want to follow you online, where can they do that?
They can follow me at Tchotchke on Blue Sky. That's TCHOTCHKE on Blue Sky. That's also my Substack. I am on Instagram as Tchotchke, although there's an underscore in there and I don't know where it is. But
I didn't know you were that on Blue Sky. I just followed you. I thought you were under your name. No. I'm still finding everyone post Twitter migration. So yeah,
and that's mostly where I am. And I also have a cool website that I just redesigned. That's allegrarosenberg.com. That's where you can find out about my writing and my upcoming book and all that good stuff.
Thank you again. This was great.
Thank you.
Panic World is a Garbage Day production. Subscribe to the newsletter at garbageday.email. Panic World is written and produced by Grant Irving. It's hosted by me, Ryan Broderick. Our amazing researcher is Adam Bumas. It's engineered by Rebecca Seidel. Our deranged logo was created by Gabby Cash. Please give us $5 at patreon.com/panicworld. Please give us products to sell by contacting Multitude at multitude.productions/ads. For any other way you would like to give us money or work with us or promote us or become financially entangled with us, you can reach out to our fixer, our wonderful bag man, Josh Fjelstad, and you can reach him at panicworldpod@gmail.com. And one piece of advice from me to you: chill out, touch grass while you still can.
It breaks my brain a little that when I read Jules's tweets forgetting that he ordered bottled water, I'm like, this guy's making some good points. But then I feel completely then I'm like, no, I can't agree with anything that somebody says who orders a $4 bottle of water.
Champagne socialist, more like bottled water Bolshevik. Am I right? Am I right, guys?
It was worth it.
Don't worry, I'm still recording, so we've got that on the tape. Find a way to fit that in.